Who was in the last session? Raise a hand. I do not have a funny video. I'm so sorry. Hagstrom, the guy down here on the left. A little bit later, we'll actually talk to the guy on the right, Brian. He's the saber. And yay! Hey, Brian! For those of you that are not the saber, which sounds like maybe 6 of you, he's going to talk a little bit about his journey with ServiceNow, specifically around some of the IT operations platform. And so for those of you that don't know, I'm the IT operations specialist. I'm based here in Dallas. We're already well ingrained in the concept of incident, problem, change, all the stuff that I don't know anything about. Because frankly, I didn't come from that world, guys. I was an infrastructure guy. I spent my entire 15 years in IT doing VMware and storage and server and throwing out applications on top of all of that stuff. And so what ended up happening to me is I got into this role and I realized I became a translator. We'll talk about that concept a little bit here in a second. So what we find are that these service outages are making headlines. And what happens when a service outage makes a headline? It impacts your reputation. We live, and you saw it this morning from Southwest, we live in this always connected world, right? Where all of our end users are expecting to be able to access our application. Yesterday, my propane tank's emptied. So what do? I immediately go to my propane taxi app, which exists, and I immediately order 2 tanks of propane. If that app had not been online, I would have just gone down to the CVS and I would have bought it from the Bluebird tank right there instead. So you have to have that system up on and always available to your customers at all times. Secondly, what it does is it impacts profit. As I said, I would have just moved on to the next application if that hadn't been available to me. And there's some research over there jiggling in the corner that says, on average, a Fortune 500 company that's experiencing about 1.5 or so hours of outages in a week could expect to see about $46 million a year of lost revenue. That's impactful, right? $46 million a year just from outages. So how are we going to fix this, and why is this even a problem? So let's look at the timeline a little bit. And first, I think it makes sense to have a bit of a definition of what a service is. So when we talk about services, we're talking about those things like that propane taxi app, or your customer billing portal, or your messaging platform, or whatever it is that's being consumed by both your internal and your external customers. Now, yeah, some of those things may be an actual application. If you're using a messaging platform, it might be Exchange. But in most cases, end users don't recognize that. They just think of a service. And what they want to consume is that mail thing. Outlook's down. Outlook isn't down. Outlook is the application running on your desktop. But your mail server is down, right? How many of y'all as IT folks have had that question come in? Most of you, right? So it's important that we're speaking the same language here. As we move through this conversation, what we're really talking about are business services that are being provided back to the end users. And we're having a disconnect there to some degree. So the first thing that happens, it's that bad word moment that I refuse to say in front of everyone. But an event occurs, right? That may be the result of a naughty admin that went into your application and made a change without permission, an unplanned change. They knew better than everybody else. Who's read the Phoenix Project? Another show of hands. So these are the Bruces that just go and willy-nilly do things in their application stack without telling anybody. It could have been something that was a complete total accident. I'm walking through the data center, minding my own business, and because we didn't do a good job, I rip a cable out of the switch. And now that application goes down. Or it could have been some bad guy trying to get in from the outside and created a breach. Regardless of how that happened, what ends up happening next is we create an incident, and if we have enough of those incidents, we put them under an umbrella of a problem. That's where the fun starts. So we get on the phone, spin up the WebEx, send out an email and say, hey, there's a swap bridge open, everybody jump on. And all of IT has to jump onto this call, right? And we all start sitting there and looking at our systems and trying to figure out what it is that's wrong. And we're all looking at our own individual tools and we're all diving down deep trying to figure out what to do next. Meanwhile, the SLA timer is just ticking away. And that business user is waiting to have their system back online. More importantly, for every minute that ticks away, we're driving up the cost of that outage. Because when I'm down, I can't service my customer, they're not spending money with me, or I'm impacting them in some other way. So after we've gone through all of this process, we finally realized, oh, there's something wrong over here. It was that cable that I tripped out of the wall, or it was that naughty admin that made that change. So now I'm going to put something in place, and I'm going to put the actual correct change back into place, and that's when I start to realize the relief. The time it takes for all that to happen is that metric that we measure at the bottom, which is the mean time to recovery, MTTR. We talk about that a lot. My job in life is to reduce MTTR for your organization. The happier end users are, the more available their systems are, the faster they're able to get back up online, the happier they are, and the happier you are as IT, right? Happy end users mean happy IT. Just because we've gotten that problem fixed, though, does not mean that we've finished the process of finding the relief. What was it that happened? Ultimately, there has to be some kind of a root cause analysis. And everybody wants to know what it was that caused the problem, right? There's lots of reasons why. First of all, we need to do some measurement. We want to understand what that actual cost was. But more importantly, we want to put governance in place to make sure we don't do that again. If the data center has cables strung all over the floor, we probably need to do some changes to make sure that they're strung up in the rack the right way. And that's what we're going to learn from that outage incident. Quick quiz. Which one of these three events should I go immediately start to prioritize as number one? I'll let you all take a minute and think about it for a second. No clue, right? So I was in your shoes for a long time. I would look at this and I'd say, okay, I have no idea what that is, but that's a SQL state. That sounds like a database. If database is down, that usually means the application sitting on top of it's down. I don't know anything else about this business, but I know those are airplane codes or airport codes, so that's probably where that server is. Is Tulsa one of my production data centers? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe it's in San Jose that I need to go look. If I've been with the organization long enough, I probably know quickly that one of those systems are the more impactful systems, right? Craig talked about it this morning in his keynote. They're trying to push more and more partners in to help with some of the tier 3, level 3 type of threats. How do you handle that with a partner? If Unisys, IBM, any one of the names of these guys that are sitting out here in the hallway log into your systems and they're trying to troubleshoot your tier 3 tickets, all they have is this random CI in their database. They have no idea what that means. So we'll come back to this. So why is it such a problem that that's what we have and that's what we're doing? Well, first of all, we can't tell what systems are connected to which service. So again, let's think about that definition of what a service is. I know that if I look at my tool, I may have SolarWinds, I may have Scum, I may have Trackit, I may have whatever it is. I know what all the individual CIs in my infrastructure are. I know what all the pieces in my environment are that make up a component of something, but I can't necessarily correlate that back to that business service as the end user sees it. And that impacts my visibility. Because I don't know those relationships, I'm also not able to respond quickly and figure out what broke when something breaks to impact that particular service. If somebody calls in and says email's down, or nobody's able to place orders on the propane taxi app, you immediately have to start digging your way back through it manually every single time. And then lastly, what we're trying to do ultimately as an IT organization is provide agility back to our organization. We want to be able to quickly, and that's the measurement here, quickly provide services and resources back to the end user community. And the end user community may be us ourselves, IT. I need a VM spun up. I want to be able to get it now. But if I, again, have to go back through and figure out, okay, this ESX host has 65 guests running on it, and there's 2 terabytes worth of storage available, versus this ESX host that's doing whatever it may be, it slows down the process of me being able to deliver that service. And so the goal is to be able to provide that with ServiceNow. So all those hands that went up earlier, which was most of you guys, incredibly familiar with this left side of the screen, right? You have incident, you have problems, you have a CMDB. Let's do another fun question. How many of y'all CMDBs are excellent? There's one person here that actually can say they have a weaponized CMDB. How many of y'all have mediocre CMDBs? Sad, right? And if you look around, how many of you have really bad CMDBs? Yeah. Why is that?
It's too much work.
It's too much work, it takes time. There's a lot of reasons why we get to that point, right? So on the right side of the column are all of the rest of us. We're working away, slaving away day in, day out in our silo. I'm the server guy. I love Microsoft because I'm a Windows admin. So guess what I stare at all day long? Scum. I'm a network engineer. I love Cisco. Guess what I stare at all day long? My Cisco Works dashboard. Whatever it may be, we all have our individual tools that we live in, our silos that we live in. And unfortunately, never the two shall meet. And that's where we get some of this disconnection. So what ServiceNow is going to do with some automated discovery capabilities is bring all those CIs into the CMDB and actually make it service aware. So we can start to think about things in that same definition I mentioned earlier. If I then can layer in the events and the alerts from all of those siloed tools, you can start to imagine in your mind what that picture looks like, right? And then lastly, I can provide a closed loop process with change. So before I actually go to make a change on a system, I can quickly go understand what service am I going to impact when I make this change. Because ultimately that's what I want to do, right? I want to avoid the problem in the first place. Systems don't just decide to go down in most cases. I don't know what the stat is, 80%, something like that, I think Gartner says, they're human-caused errors that cause our outages. And in most cases, it's a simple mistake. Somebody clicked the wrong button or hit the reboot button too fast. They didn't mean anything by it, but it happens, right? By having that process and understanding what I'm going to impact before I make a change, I can really start to progress this forward. So here's that same timeline, but now we've got ServiceNow in the process, in the middle. And what we really want to do, again, is kind of move this along, right? So if we took all of that process that we saw before, where we throw all the people in the organization, we throw all the tools at it, and began to automate some of that, what we can do is start to shrink that MTTR. And again, that was my job in life, is to help drive your MTTR down. Let's think of a common outage challenge. SQL database temp file overruns, the temp directory overruns. What's the solution? Run a backup, dump the temp directory, add space to that server. How long does it take for one of your admins to log in, get the right credentials, go and make that adjustment, create the change record, all the steps that are required? An hour? 2 hours? Let's just say it's an hour. They have to do that 3 times a week. That's 3 hours that person burns. What if I could make this a right-click automation that he just hits run and goes? I still get the incident created. I still get the change record created. There's still an approval process and a chain. I can still see the metrics around how many times I had to do that. And at some point, I can push that back out to the DBAs or the app development team to fix the problem that's causing that temp database to overrun in the first place. But automation is what we do to shrink that time. The other thing you notice is now, instead of having a team of people that are working a problem, we have single ownership. If the network's the thing that's broken, then let's let the network admin fix it. If the SAN is down, let the SAN guy fix it. Why are we dragging everybody else in the organization in every single problem that occurs, if they don't need to be there? So, moving even a step further than that is this idea of service intelligence. Prevent the problems in the first place. When a disk begins to fill, it typically tells us that, right? It's going to give us a heads up. Hey guys, I'm getting a little bit full. You might want to do something about me. And the problem is, and we'll talk about this in a second when we talk to Sabre, is that's lost in a sea of noise. Nobody has the time to proactively go in and see that alert and action against it before it becomes a problem. The other thing we talk about generally, and you hear this metric a lot, is this concept of keeping the lights on and that proportion of IT spend. And typically it's running about 80-20, 70-30, right? By automating all this, what the goal is to drive that efficiency closer to a 60-40. And by giving innovation back to the organization, we get to do the kind of things that we heard about today from Frank, from Craig. Make sense? So let's go back to this. I've gone through my organization, I've taken advantage of these tools, I've mapped them out. Now I know the business services that impact that specific CI. Now I know exactly where to go look. Yeah, that database was a good lead, but it turns out that's some test instance for the procurement team. I'm not going to go spend my efforts fixing that. And I put those in blue on purpose. At some point they need to be addressed, right? But they don't need to be prioritized number one. But that web server that's down that's affecting my customer billing portal absolutely needs to be prioritized. So that's a real life example of something like this taking place. All right, so all of us raised our hand, we're all ServiceNow customers. Nonetheless, you need to figure out where you are on this journey that we take you on, right? And in the first phase, we're working on some things, and what we're really talking about here too is this middle phase, this concept of availability. Now, as you're looking across some of that stuff that's grayed out, you're thinking, well, I have that. Ooh, we do a little bit of this too. So yeah, I understand. All customers are going to have different pieces, but in general, what we want to do is get you to this middle phase. And this middle phase is made up of a few key things. Number one, it's good monitoring. You already have those tools in place today, right? How many of y'all do not have a monitoring system in your infrastructure? Not a single hand goes up. As we expect. The other capability here is to be able to do good root cause analysis. And and I say good, and I emphasize that for a reason. We can do root cause analysis. That server was the problem, but why was that? And then we also want to be able to provide some dashboarding. And lastly, the automation that we talked about earlier allows us to expand this use case. So here are the reasons we can't get here in most cases. We don't have a good way to connect our infrastructure back to our services. We talked about that earlier. We also, as we just saw from that quiz, we don't know how to prioritize those incidents as they're coming in. And that leads to this poor service availability. So again, ServiceNow to the rescue. Now, in this first phase, what we're really talking about is our automated discovery and our service mapping. And as we expand into the second phase, what we're doing is we're laying in the event management. And that's what you're seeing on the right side here. These are screenshots from those 3 particular products. These are very different than what most people think of when they think of ServiceNow, right? Because these are different tools doing different things. In fact, they talk to a different group. We saw that slide in the cloud where there was the IT operations team and the service management team. Those 2 teams don't talk necessarily. This is the ability for us to all come together and play on the same platform. So let's look a little bit more at each of these different things. So I've mapped out my service. How many of your VPs or directors call up and say, hey, what's our availability on the messaging platform for last month? Could you provide that if they did ask for it? Some of you can, yeah, that's good. For those of you that could not, with service mapping enabled, we can actually go and give a Service 360 view of what's going on in the infrastructure. And we can see, oh, messaging's only got a 66% reliability rating. That's not good. Well, let's dive in a little bit further and understand what's going on with that. And we can see specifically there was a date where our availability dropped off. Again, this is a VP or a director level person who's got a view and an insight into the organization. The rest of us, the IT admins in the world, we know that email's been a problem all week long, right? We've been ducking and driving those calls all week long trying to avoid having to fess up. But now we start to see some availability and some visibility back to that level. Now, for those of us that are in the trenches, this is the kind of view I want to be able to exhibit. This is what I expect to see in my NOC dashboard. So all my business services, all of my alerts, all being correlated into a single dashboard. And if you look down here at the bottom, all these alerts that are feeding in correspond directly to the services that sit up above them. I've got big boxes, I've got small boxes, red boxes, yellow boxes. I think I just turned into a Dr. Seuss book. But it's important to understand I can look at this in a number of different ways. Bigger the box, bigger the business criticality based on the view that I have selected here. If I'm the CFO, I may want to look at the bigger boxes based on the dollar amount that I'm losing by having that system offer online. And again, being proactive, I would rather go chase a bunch of yellow boxes than trying to always constantly live in the red box world. And that's where we're trying to get to. So we've noticed this one red box down here in the corner. What's going on with that? Again, as a guy in the trenches, as an IT admin, I want to be able to dive in and understand that a little bit better. So this is that example. This is a business service map. This is an automated, self-updating business service map. How many of y'all have a Visio stapled on the side of your cube wall or in your office? How many of you have a Visio in a folder that everybody has shared access to? How often do those Visios get updated? Never. Probably the day that application was brought online is when that Visio was created, right? That Visio was updated 5 minutes ago. Which one do you think provides more information? See the red bar at the top? Something bad happened to my application. Remember, we saw it was red. What if I could take that scroll bar and go back to when it wasn't red and see what that application looked like at that point? Do you think I could get my application back online a little bit faster? Absolutely. And which of the systems do I need to be putting my focus on? Based on just looking at that map. I can quickly go in and understand that my SQL instance at the bottom is having a problem. In fact, I can barely make it out, but it's got a very similar SQL state error that we saw earlier. So guess who I'm going to call? My DBA. Hey, there's something wrong with your database. Can you go fix it, please? The application's down. So this is the end game. That's where we want to get. And lastly, after we fixed all these problems, we go back to our director and we can show them how good of a job we're doing. We think pizzas on Thursdays is probably more relevant now because we've been able to resolve our incident time. And now you can get that pizza. Pizza as a service. So for the business, there's a couple of things to look at. We want to measure how we're succeeding in a couple different ways. First of all, from an operating expense measurement, we want to look at how much labor we can save by eliminating some of those repeatable tasks But then also just the process of creating those maps themselves. If you look over there, America was able to reduce by $20 million the amount of time that they were spending just by automating their processes. There are a lot of familiar faces, and I'm looking a lot of you guys in the eyes in this room that I've had this conversation with. If you take a second to simply go through and understand how many of those small things you can remediate quickly and automatically, you can see really quickly how much labor you get back. Now, I also understand we're not letting people go, right? Not in this day and age, especially in Dallas. It's hard enough to find an IT guy in Dallas, much less let one go. But we can definitely reposition his efforts on something that's more productive for the organization, more productive for that employee. And me as an employee, I don't want to do password resets all day long. I don't want to unlock accounts all day long. That's not a good use of my time. So let's automate that and let me go do something really cool, like figure out why that MySQL server keeps having a temp drive thing. The other thing of measurement here that we want to look at is quality of service. And again, that's where the end users start to understand how they're being provided the service. And again, we measure that with NTTR. Another example there is TransAlta being able to take their outages down, the number of outages down by 80%, and their war room reduction for semantic by 50%. Imagine being able to save that much time sitting on the phone. I've done many a 24-hour war room call, waiting for an application to come back online. If I cut that in half, that's substantial. So, summarizing it all again, key to being able to give you that service visibility and availability is leveraging the ServiceWatch Insight package. And again, those components are our automated discovery, our service mapping tool, our event management tool, and understanding some differences with the ServiceNow platform in general. We're cloud first. We weren't on-prem and then pushed into the cloud. We've always been cloud. We're service-centric. We're looking at the world from a whole different viewpoint than most organizations. We're not infrastructure-centric. And we're a single platform. So your incidents, your problems, your changes, all your platform information, and now, if you heard today, your customer service management, your HR management, all these things that are impactful to your business are all in a single platform. So what we want to do ultimately, as I said at the beginning, is one of two things. Either reduce risk and cost or increase experience for the end user. And this package does that. So with that, let's hear a little bit from our customer here.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Boyd. I work for Sabre. And for those who aren't familiar with Sabre, we provide software and technical solutions for the travel and hospitality industries.
So yeah, Brian, tell us a little bit more what you do, it's specifically within Sabre and kind of how that relates to ServiceNow.
Sure. And so for my role right now, I'm focused on automation, more specifically on event management. And I know Eric, he showed some screenshots. He mentioned event management up there on the screen. A little more specifically about what that means is we have multiple different monitoring tools that can generate events and alerts. We need to get all of those into one place where we have visibility to them. We can correlate those events, and we can see that all of these application events are actually related to this one storage event, for example. We can get rid of some of the noise. We can eventually set ourselves up for auto remediation. And so that's been my main area of focus.
So tell me a little bit, you have Command Center with Lost in the Noise up here. Tell everybody what the Command Center is for the two people that don't work for you guys.
The Command Center is our eyes on glass, the 24/7 support desk that is watching the screen of essentially what's bad, what's wrong in the environment. There's always something lit up. Previously it's been a sea of red, and the Command Center staff, people refer to it as a knock or a SOC. They're always watching that screen, following procedures on what do I do to resolve these issues.
You say you had a bunch of different tools. How many tools were we really talking about correlating into a single platform?
We have dozens of monitoring tools. And just to be clear, we're still on this journey. We're not done. We haven't figured it all out. But we have dozens of monitoring tools. And from an event management perspective, that's fine. I shouldn't care. From a larger perspective, we want to simplify our monitoring tools, yes. But my goal is to take all of those different events from all those various monitoring tools and get them into one place. The problem we have today, one of the screenshots that Eric showed earlier was lack of visibility. And that's a problem that we've had, is that different teams have their own monitoring tools. It makes it a challenge if you are on the incident management team. There's a priority one incident and you want to know what's going on. and there's some event and some monitoring tool that you didn't even know about. Maybe you do know about it, but you don't have access to it. I want to see all of those in one place.
So you've been on this journey for a little while. Where have you gotten? And what have you guys seen already as you've deployed? And if I'm correct, you officially went live about a week ago. Is that correct?
We go live this Friday.
This Friday. Woohoo!
Yes. So backing up a little bit, so we've been using ServiceNow for change, problem, incident, and configuration for a while now. And we selected ServiceNow for the event management platform for us. It just made sense as we looked at other solutions, what we were wanting to do, it was a clear choice for us. Some of the problems that we've had previously, I mentioned kind of the sea of red of events. There's been no prioritization of those events. So I'm an operator, I'm using my tribal knowledge to discern and prioritize what event do I work first. Oh, this I know based on maybe the server name, this is a non-production CI, so I'll bump this to the bottom of the list. I'll skip over it essentially. And these, oh, the application team told me these don't matter, so I'll skip over these. And you're applying all of that tribal knowledge. And there's no prioritization. There's no room for improvement is one of the problems we're seeing. So what we're able to see going forward, what we have implemented, is we can actually apply prioritization. We can say that when I see this pattern, bump this to the top of the list. Production should take priority over non-production events, for example. There's no reason why the entire organization shouldn't have access to see the list of incidents and what's wrong in the environment. It's not just the command center team. We're pulling in level 2 and level 3 support teams. They need to be able to, even in the middle of the night, quickly see, why did I just get called for? What's going on? And so one of the great things I think about ServiceNow is that it makes it easy to expose the data in a common way. Like I mentioned, we already had change and incidents, so many of these teams were already familiar with the platform and had access to it. So it only made sense to put the events in there as well.
Cool. So what's next?
So some of the, like I said, we're still on this journey. Some of the things that we have next are improving our CMDB and service mapping. This is something where that's probably our biggest limitation for really taking event management to the next level as far as correlation and providing visibility to the organization. When I see this event come in, what business service is it tied to? It's kind of like the pop quiz that Eric gave us. When I just see the raw events, they don't have any context to them. We need to be able to apply context. What's the impact? Which customers are impacted, for example? And that also has a lot of possibilities as far as better correlation. The whole goal is to reduce the noise. I want to get down to that root cause. We might want to see the rest of the events as seeing that they are related, but I want to, from an operator perspective, I just want to see that one root cause event. And that's where correlation, better mapping is important. Another area is auto remediation. I shouldn't have to go and manually look up what the procedure is and go through these 10 steps or call someone. If this is happening regularly, let's automate that. What we've seen just by getting all of these events into one place, we're already seeing about 10% of our events are either process not running or file system related. Those are great candidates for auto remediation. And so we're able to use that by getting all of the events in one place and doing some normalization of the data and reporting. We can prioritize what are we going to tackle from an auto remediation perspective.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So let's open it up to you guys. What questions do you guys have? So I've got a microphone coming around here in the back. We'll weave around to the edge.
Hi, I have a question about availability in ServiceNow. So for ServiceNow, availability as a rule, it's easy enough to have availability on, off. But availability as calculated by most businesses who are wanting to look at availability to determine business impact. How does ServiceNow approach that? Let's say, for example, defining, putting like percentages of importance or prioritization percentages on functionality, or even time of day or day of week? How are you applying that?
Sure, being able to customize that view to some degree and understanding the size of those boxes essentially is what we're talking about, right? Being able to understand which size box should I make large, which box should I make small based on all those rules. And
You have that built in right now?
yeah, it's built in as part of mapping and building that service, that business service itself. So I can create business rules that associate and define essentially how that business service is going to be reflected to the end user community. So that we can take all of those inputs that you just mentioned and make those correspond to how those business services size or scale accordingly. So good question. Got one over here. Here, I'll just cut on closer.
So I had a question. We're actually exploring the event module, so I'm assuming that that's what you're implementing, the Sabre, as part of your solution. So can you go into a little bit more detail of what you've been experiencing with ServiceWatch and then trying to get the event module going for you?
So ServiceWatch is something we will roll out next year, but we haven't done that yet. As far as event management, yes, that is what we've been focusing on this year, and getting a good number of our monitoring tools integrated, so they are sending their events into ServiceNow, into the event management application within ServiceNow. And from there, using the rules to do deduplication, correlation, automatic creation of incidents, prioritization, automated prioritization of those incidents, things like that. Automated integration with knowledge, so we have the knowledge articles linked to the incident tickets, for example.
Brian, what are the top three event management tools that you, or monitoring tools that you brought in? Or a couple, the top two.
So IP Center is the biggest one.
And how did you integrate that? Was that through SNMP or did you build a connector?
So at the moment, all of them that we're integrating is through the REST interface. We wanted to keep it simple. The SNMP interface we had some concerns with just because it's UDP based, and we prefer TCP just from a visibility and reliability perspective. The connectors, we decided not to go that path, and we just wanted as simple as possible, just going through the REST interface. So we have IPsoft's IP Center product, Zabbix. We've done some work with SolarWinds, App Dynamics, to name a few.
Okay, cool.
Maybe internal ones also.
And then internal applications.
Some homegrown monitoring tools, essentially? Yeah.
We haven't run into one where we haven't had a problem. There's even been a few services, SaaS solutions that we consume where teams have said, hey, we don't monitor it, this is a service, but they send us an email occasionally. It might only be 1 or 2 times a month, but when we get that email, it's important.
Yeah.
Can we integrate that?
Turn
And then we're not
it on.
live on that, but those are capabilities that the platform provides.
Awesome, awesome.
Louis Oliver with Mary Kay. You just went along the list of most of the tools I'm integrating for event management. I have a lot of different questions I could ask you about them, especially with social events. But that's not what I want to ask. You mentioned correlation in several different aspects of correlation in ServiceWatch and service mapping. Are you looking to integrate your change module through ServiceWatch so that you can correlate your change windows with your outages so that you don't have noise?
Yes, we are not doing that currently. With our current implementation, we did put in some logic to integrate with change. That way we're not presenting an incident to an operator when we're in the middle of a change window. There's a lot more complexity to that, so it's not enabled. Is that what you're asking?
No, I was just asking if you're planning to do that. And if you do have an incident that should have been generated, are you looking at doing what I'm calling a dormant alert, so you have a record of what would have happened in case of concern?
It's a good question. I don't know, honestly.
If you have time after the session, I'd love to pick your brain.
Yeah, I'll be around.
So you continue the events, you keep the events, but you just may or may not submit an incident, right? So no data's not lost.
All right, you're in the middle, so you have to scream loud.
All right, so my question is, every time they get the service now guys on, they always say the mapping is all automatic. Then when you're talking about your next step is to do all the business mapping, business process mapping, how automated is it really? I mean, do you even try to use the tools to map it, or are you having to do it all manually?
So the question is about the service mapping, and we hear that it's automated. And then the question is, how much work are we having to do? Is that your question? So one, I'm not the expert on service mapping, so I'll lay that down. My understanding though, there is a fair amount that's automated, but there's still manual work that's involved.
Absolutely.
For that, so it's not magical.
And we'll agree. You know, my peer over here, Mr. Gibb, actually is, I think, coined the term pixie dust and unicorns and rainbows or something to that effect, is what it sounds like when we talk about service mapping. And for those of you that have been on that journey with us, it does take some effort. And if anybody representing any product in this space stands in front of you and says it's magic and it's just gonna work, they're full of it and walk away quickly. And that includes us. And hold us accountable for that. It does take some effort. But once you've gotten that effort completed, moving forward, I have a picture of what that application looks like and I have my patterns defined. No longer do I have to go back and continuously tweak that. More importantly, as my organization matures, that becomes part of my app dev process in general. Before a production application is released into the wild, a service application pattern is defined, and that's just part of rolling an application out. And we get away from us trying to go catch up from where we were to a point where we just are going to continue to operate in that mode. Now, that's a dream state, I agree as well, so I don't want to get too close to saying pixie dust, but here's some work definitely involved.
Howdy.
Hi.
So who determines the patterns? Is that your applications team that says, okay, if you get this alert, it's a legitimate incident? Or do you have somebody from your process side that goes back and takes a look at those and determines those events?
It kind of depends. So you mentioned incidents, and so we automatically create incidents for anything that where an action could be taken. Okay. As far as defining the rules, as far as prioritization, there's a couple things. It depends on that we rely on the teams who own these alerts, who are instrumenting these alerts and understand the context. And then there's also going to be a continual improvement process. From this last outage, we just learned that when we see this, that's really bad. It wasn't the top priority in the list, and it should have been. Let's go and figure out why. What do we need to change, for example?
So, and I don't want to speak for Brian and his organization, but in general, one of the topics and kind of the key tenets I preach is you have to include the business. If you expect IT to go out and run and do all of this on their own, they're going to get burdened under their own process. If you don't get the business involved as well, two things happen. Number one, it's too much work for IT, and number two, nobody cares. If the business isn't consuming and using and processing part of the process, they don't care that you've done all this work to create these maps and to create all these event rule prioritizations. They just walk away and they go back to what they were doing. So I think it's very important that you reach across the wall and grab your friend's hand in the business and those process owners and make sure they're involved in the process end to end. Another question back there in the back?
I can make this a short one.
All right.
Event prioritization, are you referring to event rules as correlation mechanisms to tie the events to create a single alert incident?
That's not what I was referring to, but that's another aspect. So in ServiceNow, there are three types of rules. You have your event records, the raw events that come in. Those get deduplicated. I'm getting the same event every 5 minutes. I don't want to see all of that noise. So each of those generates a unique event record, but they all dedupe to the same alert record. Now we have the rules where we can also take multiple alert records and correlate those to a single incident record as well. The prioritization I was talking about was on the incident record.
So not a part where you're tying multiple separate incident records that are already due to look different. When you tie them together, so these three things are actually one. You
Yes.
handle that like manually separate event.
And that's an area, honestly, we're only scratching the surface on for correlation. That's where we need the service mapping. We need better data in our CTB. We need, and even if we had all of that, we just haven't gotten that far yet. And so there's a lot of potential there for us to make use of that data to do better correlation.
And that goes back to communication with business owners at the SMEs and the areas to understand how to tie.
Correct.
He's coming back there with the microphone. Michael, here's one right here.
So how does that integrate with data already in the CMDB? So we're in healthcare, so we have a lot of systems that are patient critical. obviously. So we have different SLAs tied to different maybe application CIs or even infrastructure CIs, depending on if that's a medical device or something like that. So as far as your event monitoring, how does that integrate with your CMDB and the data that's already there?
Sure. So one of the fields of the event record, so the monitoring tool that sends an event, it needs to pass in essentially a CI name. And ServiceNow can automatically map that string to the record, that CI record in the CMDB. And so once you have that mapping, and it's done automatically if it can find it, then you have the ability for your rules to reference data in the CMDB. Which data center is this in? Which environment does it support? What's the business criticality of the associated services? And so those are some of the things we're already doing. Some of our rules already are able to dig into our CMDB to make those decisions, which is very cool.
You want to?
Yeah, just
A little follow-up on that.
so heard CMDB a couple of times, and so just to comment on that, obviously the more data you get in one place, the better analytics, the more intelligence you get out of it. So having a mature CMDB that's accurate and up to date, and then you start layering event, real-time information on top of that, allows you to get a very powerful view. So if you think it's, right now we're on health safety, about to go to this new rule, and we're in our second iteration of what we call service analytics, right? And so this starts to look at things like CIs. Every time this happens here, and then that happens. I see that pattern over and over again. I start to derive root cause analysis at that point, and we get a little bit of machine learning in the platform. And that just all comes back to, again, the CMDB and having accurate and up-to-date and healthy information in here. That event management now all of a sudden just is really icing on the cake at that point to really help you find the true root cause of that problem.
All right, then I have one last request. If you notice down there at the bottom, I have my blog. I'm a social kind of guy.